There, there's a certain trap in modern society that's quite easy to fall for. Specifically, the trap of being conditioned to want certain things, even to our own detriment. So, the example I'm going to use here is owning a home. So, many of us are told, oh, rent is flushing money down the toilet, and at least with a mortgage, you are building equity. But what most people don't do is actually do the math for themselves on all of the expenses that go into home ownership that are non-recoupable. So it's the interest on the mortgage payment that doesn't build equity. It's any maintenance, any property taxes, any unexpected, unforeseen expenses that may come up, things like replacing the roof, fixing up the gutter, um, just random things that might break that you are responsible for, not the landlord. Calling someone, calling a plumber, calling pest control if there's an issue with that, and so on. These are all things the landlord covers for the tenant when they're renting. The reality is, many of us are conditioned in this way because it fits a certain consumerist society that then benefits from us. The more you end up wanting the things that society conditions you want, the more you'll find yourself struggling in different areas. There's this statistic that I think a third of people who are earning 100,000 or more a year are living paycheck to paycheck. And it's true, if you have the average sort of debt payments that people do, car payment, mortgage, and so on, and you fall for these certain traps of wanting these things, then you will end up living paycheck to paycheck even with six figures. And it's not necessarily an economy or an inflation issue. I think it's more of a societal, psychological issue. In a way, not wanting something is as good as having it. And it's often much more expensive to try to get the thing than it is to simply change what you want and to want something different. Like if you instead learn to want and appreciate a simpler lifestyle with, say, a used car and renting a place that's relatively inexpensive, especially if you live in a place where there are controls on how much rent can increase every year, renting is really not that bad. You're paying for a place to live. That's perfectly fine. That's a valid expense. It's not a waste of money. But this is just one example, right? It's not just cars and houses that we're told to want. It's independence, right? We're told that, oh, we should be living on our own, and people are shamed for living with their parents into their 20s or 30s. When actually some of the healthiest families, from other cultures such as Indian cultures and so on, they actually had joint families where they would have three generations living in the household. And this worked really well for them because it meant that young people growing up were not as lonely. It meant that older parents were taken care of. It meant that children grew up with multiple generations in the household to learn from. There was more diversity of ideas. And it meant that when someone had a problem, they could go to their family and ask for help. And you would have like 10, 15 people coming to the aid of this one person. So it made things much more manageable during emergencies or disasters or crises in one person's life. There was a support system. And the funny thing is now, with so many people living on their own, that is multiple rents, paid, one rent per person, one Netflix subscription, one Wi-Fi subscription, one utility bill, and so on. So the total expenses end up being much higher. So things are a lot less affordable if everything gets split up. So that's another way we are manipulated. We're also manipulated into wanting the most expensive, you know, food. Things like DoorDash and Uber Eats end up being a lot more expensive over time, and they've just become normalized when they weren't a few years ago. They didn't even exist really. We're also manipulated into wanting, for example, real diamonds as opposed to lab-made diamonds, even though lab-made diamonds are superior and less expensive and more ethical. The culture is still around these, you know, artificially scarce, often unethically mined diamonds that, are mined with like slave labor. So the question worth asking yourself whenever you desire something is this a genuine desire of mine? Is this sincere? Is this coming from me? Or is it something that's been implanted in me so that I will, benefit whatever system I'm in by wanting this thing? And the more you ask this question of yourself, the more you will get in touch with what you actually want. And the more you do that, the more abundant you will feel. By tuning your desires to who you really are, you'll actually end up with more wealth and more agency as opposed to feeling like a puppet.